Hey, I should have made note of the fact that it is December of 2022. Probably the back half of that month, I'll get all of this recorded before I head out to my little 3-week cruise to Antarctica. And I will work on getting it all posted as well as recorded. That occurred to me this morning as I was thinking about this section, which is about suicide. I considered not putting it in at all because it's kind of a downer, but on the other hand, as Kari made the point in one of her recent speeches, we just have to get comfortable with the word and, more importantly, comfortable with talking about it. So here's my little piece. Another thing that occurred, I have less than 30 seconds of video on Fifi. I have none on Adam. You'll have more of me than you could possibly want when this thing's done. But we should all make it a priority to at least occasionally, but somewhat regularly, take video of each other. God forbid we ever want it, need it, but if and when you do, nice to have there. I mean, God, I wish we had that on both of them. Okay, suicide. I have felt like I'm a suicide carrier for years. My exposure to it started in high school. We had a real quiet classmate named Greg Stoner, and is often the case with the real quiet ones, just as nice a dude as you can want. I think we got to junior year in high school when this incident happened. He had worked his ass off nights, weekends, summers to accumulate enough money to buy a brand new cherry red Ford Mustang GT. Holy crap, was this thing beautiful. Had it decked out exactly like you wanted it, not pimped in any way, just nice. And that's where he was found, in the school parking lot, Pius X High School parking lot, one morning, having shot himself in the head. And as with most suicides, nobody had a clue that it was coming. Nobody had a clue as to why. He didn't leave a note. So there was incident number one. Then my cousin Ray Witt committed suicide. By the way, committed suicide? Right there, I'm supposed to say, took his own life. I think that's another woke thing. It's another euphemism. It's like when people die. I say they died. I'm in the minority. They didn't die. They passed on. So anyway, cousin Ray committed suicide. He had just graduated from law school. And I was going to move into his ultra cool apartment at about, next door to the Joslin Art Museum. directly north of there. And one day they found him, he had shot himself in the head in the bathtub in the apartment. So there again, I didn't have anything to do with him at that point, but obviously a tragedy. Then there was a Toastmasters friend of mine, Chris Gunther, and Chris hung himself in the basement, and we all knew he had hung himself in the basement. His wife refused to say it. She said he had an accident in the basement, as if it was an accident that he jumped off of a box. Once again, just kind of covering up this horror. Then came Fifi. Now, unlike Greg, unlike Ray, unlike Chris, I knew Fifi was going to be gone. I just didn't know when. Hers was pretty predictable. Christmas of 2003, we're sitting at the table in the lake house, and out of the clear blue, she says, "Sparky, if I knew I would go to heaven, I'd take my pills." Now, I didn't know we had my pills, but obviously we did. Somebody in that state of mind probably isn't going to tell you where the pills are, and she didn't, even though I asked her if I could throw them out. So that was Christmas. Valentine's Day, 45 days later. I don't remember the particulars on this one. I just know, obviously, she was pretty close to killing herself. And we ended up at my then psychiatrist, Sarah Jones' office. And Fifi had been going to Sarah a year or so. So they knew each other. The two of us went and talked to Sarah. And at the end of it, she said, "Phil, you're on 24-hour suicide watch. Don't let her leave your sight." So I didn't. During that 24 hours, I think must have been on the way home from the psychiatrist, I picked up another Valentine's Day card. And I don't even remember what the front or the inside of it said, but I remember what I wrote. And that was, "Love Sorry for the delay. Love is being on 24-hour suicide watch with Fifi." And anyone who's ever heard that story thought it was the worst thing they had ever heard. But no, she and I just died laughing, which is obviously the intent. And it kind of broke the pall that had come over things. So that was number 2. Numbers 3 and 4 kind of run together, passage of time. I was playing golf at Shadow Ridge, and I got a cell call. And I answered it, and her best friend said that Fifi had called her, sounding horrible, and asked that I come over. So I did, immediately. And when I got there, I asked, "What's going on?" And she said, "I tried to kill myself, and I'm pissed because it didn't work." And she had taken a bottle of some kind of a sedative and drunk like a quart of whiskey. So I think her exact words were, "I just haven't lost them, doesn't matter." And then finally, I get a call that her work had called the police, who were on the way over. She was on suicide watch at work, and obviously very close to him. If she didn't show up by 9 o'clock, they were supposed to call the police for a wellness check. Just as I pulled around to the front of her building, there were 2 police cars in front. So I followed them in, and she wasn't there. But she had left me a suicide letter. Actually, the second full-page suicide letter. And we found her in her garage. She had gassed herself. And very sadly, given who she was, she had gassed her 2 long-haired dachshund puppies along with her, which, knowing her, really spoke to her desperation. Enough on that. Adam. In the same way I knew Fifi was not long for this world, the same was true of Adam. We'd had probably 3 years of increasing hell. 3 years prior, there were some little things that it got a little bigger and a little bigger. And 2 years or so from his death, Lanessa and I both got restraining orders. It was that far out of control. And I think earlier I talked about how restraining order works, so I won't repeat it. Well, eventually, he got down to where he was living in a Medicaid apartment, and this is a shock. I wasn't working at the time, so he became my part-time job for his last year. And by that I mean I spent 20 hours or so a week with him, and a 1,000 hours in his last year. I remember feeling terrible guilt about Adam that I didn't feel to that extent about Fifi. I knew I had done everything I could for Fifi, and I still felt guilt with Adam. Those 1,000 hours, although full of memories, good and bad, I guess I just felt like I could have done more. And I think that's a pretty common feeling. And I won't have any more to talk about his situation, except to remind you that in the section on parenting the boys, I talked about that completely unusual recent episode where I lost it for an hour and a half. I sobbed about Fifi for 15 years, and we're coming up on year 19 with her. And, not every day, not every month, not every quarter. Sometimes not every year, but I did. And with Adam, the pain has been so deep and so overwhelming that, maybe it was a matter of time before that was gonna happen. Eric has had, I believe, 2 buddies do the same, commit suicide. One was Drew Hansen, and pretty dang sure that was Eric's. Best friend at that point, and maybe forever, I believe. And I'll never forget, they had like a rosary, they must have been Catholic, at a church, and his mom, whose name escapes me, was unbelievable. I had no idea without asking what had happened. I never knew how, never cared. I didn't know what had happened because of her. She greeted everybody and, oh, so happy to see you. Yes, we'll miss Drew, but it's so nice you honor him like this. It was unreal. And then I believe it was the famous Ruinick, and if not, Eric, I apologize. Seems to me he had gone to Penn State and ended up in Pennsylvania because Eric and some friends flew out there for services. One thing I have learned through this is never explain how somebody committed suicide. And believe it or not, people who love gossip and just have no point of reference, very few will ask you, how did he die? What did he do? For that matter, I now never ask, how did they die? If I knew it was cancer, if a heart attack, a stroke, I never ask. I just say, I'm so sorry to hear this. This is going to be a terrible loss for us all, and especially you. If they want to tell you that their person died from cancer, they'll fucking tell you. So I've completely quit asking. I started writing a book called My Friend Suicide, and I just got stuck. It was going to tell all these stories and more in much greater depth, obviously, and then talk about suicide, causes, after effects, treatment, that kind of thing. Started Lafayette. Pardon me. Now, because I have all these experiences living through people's suicides, I'm an expert. So people call. One of my attorneys, John Kinney, Phil,